Good afternoon everyone. Today I am going to cover the concept of transaction processing system. So what are transaction processing system? Transaction processing system are system with large database and hundreds of concurrent users are executing the database transactions. Okay, so here two parameters are involved. We have a large amount of database and there are number of users are involved. Okay, and they are executing the transaction concurrently. Okay, so here two parameters are we have a large database plus hundreds of concurrent users are executing the database transactions. Okay, for example, we have airline reservation. Okay, in airline reservation the number of users are trying to book a seat or they want to cancel a seat, right? Or they want to make some they want to check the what is the payment issue and all. So there are number of transactions are involved when you are booking a seat. Okay, in an airline when you are going for the airline reservation, the number of transactions are involved. Maybe you are booking a seat or cancelling a seat, right? Okay, after that we have in a banking sector. Okay, in a banking database maybe you are performing an operation of depositing or you are withdrawing the money or you are performing some transaction related to banking database. Okay, so that is nothing but you are performing some transaction related to banking database. Then considering stock market, so in a stock market there are many number of shares. Okay, in that maybe you are buying some TCS share or selling an Infosys share. Okay, so that is nothing but you are purchasing maybe for 190 Infosys share and you are selling it for 200 rupees. Okay, so that is nothing but you are performed one transaction, right? Okay, after that in a supermarket maybe you are purchasing some items. It can be any item and you are performed one transaction and it has generated with transaction ID what is the name of the item, what is the price of an item. Okay, so this is nothing but your transaction processing system where it involves where it has some large database and the number of users are involved and all the users are trying to access the same database at a time. Okay, so this system require high availability and fast response time for the hundreds of concurrent users. Okay, so actually in a transaction processing system the number of users are involved and they are trying to access the database at the same time, right? So in that case your database system should be highly available. Okay, so whenever I'm going for the bus reservation or railway reservation system and I want to perform a transaction where I want to book a seat, okay, maybe for my relatives or for my parents. Okay, in that case the system should be highly available and it should respond me very quickly. Okay, it should have fast response time. Okay, maybe I have booked the seat. Okay, in that case it should generate a report saying that the seat has been blocked and it should generate a report with this seat number, yes, like in an with the seat number S2 and in that the seat number is 48. So it should generate a report plus the system should be highly available, right? So this is what the introduction about transaction processing system. Then next we have one criteria for classifying the database system according to the number of users who can use the system concurrently, that is at the same time. Okay, so here the number of users are trying to use the system concurrently at the same time. Okay, so here we have single user as well as we have single user DBMS as well as multi-user DBMS. So what is single user DBMS? If at most one user at a time can use the system, and it is multi-user if many users can use the system and hence access the database concurrently. So here single user DBMS is nothing but if only one user is using the database. Okay, so maybe your personal computer. Okay, so where only one user is using the system or using the database, so that is nothing but single user DBMS. Whereas multi-user DBMS is many users are involved to access the database concurrently, so that is nothing but multi-user DBMS. Okay, in a single user DBMS are mostly restricted to personal computer system. Most other DBMS are multi-user. So here in personal computer system where only one user is involved and he is accessing the database, right? In multi-user many users are involved and they are trying to access the database concurrently at the same time. So next for example, considering single user and multi-user, in a multi-user system, for example, we have an airline reservation system. where many number of users are trying to access the airline database, and they are and they want to perform some operation like the booking a seat or cancelling a seat, right? So in that airline reservation system where it is used by hundreds of travel agents and reservation clerks concurrently. Okay, maybe their number of users are accessing the database, as well as this database is accessed by many number of travel agents, right? And they are trying to access this database at the same time. Okay, system in banks, insurance agencies, stock exchanges, supermarkets, and operated by many users who submit transaction concurrently to the systems. Okay, considering multi-user DBMS, where many it is done in many sectors. Okay, maybe in banking sector, insurance sector, or in stock market, or in supermarket, where many users are involved and they are trying to access that database concurrently at the same time. Okay, so this is considering multi-user where many users are involved. And then we have multi-users can access database and use computer system simultaneously because of concept of multi-programming, which allows the computer to execute multiple programs or processes at the same time. Okay, considering multi-user DBMS, where it allows multiple users to access the database at the same time concurrently, right? So this is done because of concept of multi-programming, where it allows multiple programs to execute at the same time, or it allows multiple processes to execute at the same time. So because of concept of multi-programming, where multiple users can access the database concurrently at the same time. Okay, if only a single central processing unit exists, it can actually execute at most one process at a time. Okay, suppose if we have only single central processing unit or single CPU exists, in that case it can execute at most only one process at a time. However, in multi-programming operating system, execute some commands from one process, then suspend that process and execute some commands from the next process, and so on. So here in multi-programming, or when multiple users are executing that database concurrently at the same time, or considering multi-programming operating system where it allows multiple programs or multiple processes to execute at the same time. So in that case, what it does, it executes some commands from the one process, then it suspends that process, and then again it executes some command from the next process. Okay, and so on. Okay, it continues. Okay, so a process is resumed at the point where it was suspended whenever it gets in its turn to use the CPU again. Hence, concurrent execution of processes actually interlude fashion. So here two processes are executing concurrently simultaneously at the same time in an interlude fashion. Okay, maybe a process A is executing, okay, and it wants to read some data, or it wants to read some block from a disk. Okay, in that case, instead of keeping the process A in an idle mode, we can jump it to process B, and it can execute some command from the process B, and again when it comes back to process, in that case again it resumes its execution where it was interrupted. So what happens here in a multi-programming concept where the processes are executing in an interlude fashion, it keeps the CPU busy, right? We have two processes. Process A is executing, and when it goes in an idle mode, okay, instead of keeping the CPUs in idle mode, when the process wants to read some data from the disk, okay, or when it is going in an idle mode, so in that case it can jump to process B and it can execute some command from the process B, and whatever the process that has been suspended in process A, it continues that execution where it was suspended. Okay, so once it continues its execution from the process A, again it goes to process B, and again it resumes its execution where it was suspended. So this is how the concurrent execution of process is done in an interlude fashion. Okay, so okay, you can see this diagram. So here two processes are executing. Here the process A and process B are executing in an interlude fashion. Okay, here figure shows two processes A and B are executing concurrently in an interlude fashion. Interleaving keeps the CPU busy when a process requires an input or output operation such as reading a block from disk. Okay, so here for example here process A is executing, okay, and it wants to read some data from it wants to read some block from a disk. Okay, so in that case it will suspend that process and it jumps to process B and it executes its instruction. Again when it goes back to process A, Okay, so in that case it will resume the execution where it was interrupted. Okay, so this is how the process A and B are executing concurrently in an interlude fashion. So what happens when you are working in when the processor working in an interlude fashion, it keeps the CPU in an busy mode. Okay, so instead of keeping the CPU in an idle mode, so when you execute the process in an interlude fashion, it keeps the CPU in a busy mode. Okay, here the CPU switch to execute another process rather than remaining idle during reading some block of data from the disk. If computer system has multiple hardware processes, parallel processing of multiple processes is possible, as illustrated by process C and D in the figure. Okay, when you have a computer system with multiple hardware processes, or when we have a multiple CPUs are available, parallel processing of multiple processes possible, that you can see in the diagram. When a system has multiple CPUs or multiple hardware CPUs, you can see we can execute the multiple processes parallelly. Okay, so here process C and D are executing parallelly. Okay, so that is what it is highlighting, the concept where when it has multiple processes, parallel processing of multiple processes possible. Okay. The next, what is a transaction? So transaction, it is a program unit whose execution may change the content of database. Okay, so it's nothing but a program. It's a program. You have written a program to, and whenever you execute that program, it will change the content of a database. Okay, maybe you have written a program. So whenever I update some data, okay. So maybe in my account I have only 10,000 rupees. Okay, and once I perform some transaction, okay. So maybe I am depositing some amount, right? Maybe 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees. So after that, I have done one transaction, okay, and in that case, I am updating my account, okay. So and that updated amount, it is 12,000 rupees. So that is nothing but a transaction of whatever the program unit you have written, and it is changing the content of that database. Okay, so that is nothing but we call it as a transaction. Okay, for example, you can consider a bank database. In bank database, okay, there are many sectors are available. You are performing the transaction maybe for banking database or for insurance sector or insurance database or for railway database or for airline database. So here we are considering an example for the transaction. We are considering an example of banking database. In bank database, we are selecting the database, that is a banking database, and insert into database. Okay, inserting into database is nothing but you are depositing money into the account. Okay, and then updating the database. This is nothing but a program unit which is changing the content of a database. Okay, so here we are considering an example of banking database. Whenever I want to deposit some amount, okay, in that case I should select my banking database, okay, and then I like select star from employee, or you can say select star from bank. After that you are inserting the amount into that whatever the database you have selected, right? So similarly we have selected the banking database, then we are performing an insert operation. Okay, that is nothing but we are depositing money into our account. After that, once it is done, then the amount has been updated and then the database has been updated, right? So a transaction includes one or more database access operation. This can include insertion, deletion, modification, or retrieval operation. So once a transaction, okay, a transaction, it can be related to your insertion, or it may be related to deletion, or it may be related to modification or retrieval operation. Okay, maybe you can consider an example of airline reservation. Okay, maybe you are booking a seat, right? You are inserting the data into the database, airline database, right? When you are deleting, okay, it is nothing but you are performing a deletion operation. You are cancelling a seat, right? You are deleting the data which has already been recorded. You are deleting that data from that database, right? And you are performing some modification. Maybe you are updating. Okay, you are performing some, like maybe you have booked only one seat, and again you want to update that data into the database. You want to book 3 seats. Okay, you are updating from 1 seat to 3 seats. Okay, that is nothing but you are performing some modification operation, and then your retrieval operation. Okay, whatever the data you have updated, that can be retrieved, right? So after that it will generate some report, and it will give you the report showing that you have booked 3 seats, and it will show the airline for which airline you are booked, and what is the timing, and what is the at what time you are booked. All that details will be displayed and the form will be generated, right? Okay, next, considering an example of fund transfer. Okay, so this is nothing but one transaction. Okay, what we discussed, a transaction is a program unit. Whenever you execute that program unit, it changes the content of an database, right? So considering an example of fund transfer, so here transaction to transfer 50 rupees from account A to account B. So here already in an account A I have 200 rupees, and in account B I have 400 rupees. So here I am transferring the amount from account A to account B. So in that case, the first I am performing read of A. So I am reading the value or the account value of A, that is 200. After that, A equal to A minus 50. So here from account A, the 50 rupees has been debited, okay, or 50 rupees has been deducted, right? So after that, I am performing write A. So what is the A value now? So it is 150. Okay, so the initially the amount was 200, then the 50 value has been deducted. Now the value is 150. After that, I am reading the value of B. So what is the value of B? Okay, B account value is 400, and then B equal to B plus 50. So the value is 400 plus 50. So and then write off B. Now what is the value of account B? 450. Okay, the value that has been like 50 rupees has been debited from account A, and it has been credited to account B. Okay, so this is nothing but one transaction. Okay, so the transaction has been performed where the amount has been debited from account A, and it has been credited to account B. Okay, the database operation that form a transaction can either be embedded within an application program, or they can be specified interactively via high level query language such as SQL. Okay, so the transaction, so whatever the database operation you are performing, and that forms one transaction, right? So that can be embedded whenever you are developing some application. So that can be embedded, like whatever the transaction you want to perform, that can be automatically done, and that can be embedded within an application program, or it can be done by writing the high level query language such as by using high level query language such as SQL. Okay, next, read and write operation. So what are read operations? So whenever we have some transaction to be performed, okay, so we perform two operations, mainly read or write operation. Okay, whatever, maybe I have an account, the account A. Okay, I'm just reading that value. Okay, whatever the data is stored in that account A, I'm reading that value. Maybe it is 12,000 rupees or 20,000 rupees. I'm just reading that value, whatever it is stored in that account A. Similarly, the basic data access operations that a transaction can include are as follows. Read item of X. So what it does, reads a database item named X into a program variable, right? So here I am just reading the value of an X. Okay, whatever the value that is stored in an X, maybe it is 20,000 rupees or 15,000 rupees. I am just reading that value, read of X. Okay. So here what happens when I write read of X. So whatever the data that is stored in, okay, so X equal to 10,000 rupees. Okay, so X equal to 10,000 rupees. So that value has been read. Okay, so that is nothing but read item of X. We are reading the value that has been stored in the variable X. After that, write item of X. Okay, so whatever the data that has been changed. Okay, maybe you have read the value. Okay, that is X value you have read, and then you are depositing amount into the X account. Maybe 10. Maybe you have read the value, then you are writing X equal to X plus 2,000. Okay, so here you are updated the X value, then you are write of X. Okay, here you have updated the X value, that is initially it was 10,000. Now I have added again deposited 2,000 rupees. So now the total X value is it is 12,000. Okay, so now the total X value is 12,000, and that value has been written. Okay, so write is nothing but write the value of program variable X into the database item named X. So whatever the data that has been updated, we are writing to a variable called X. Okay, so first we are reading the value, then we are updating the value, then we are writing the value. Okay, next, why concurrency control is needed? Several problems can occur when a concurrent transaction executed in an uncontrolled manner. Figure 2a shows a transaction T1 that transfer n reservation from one flight whose number of reserved seat is stored in the database item named X to another flight whose number of reserved seat is stored in the database item named Y. Okay, so in the figure you can see, we have a transaction T1 and transaction T2. So what transaction T1 is doing? So it is reading the item, okay, whatever the data is stored in the X variable, it is reading that value. After that, it is updating the X value, okay, that is nothing but we are transferring the value from the number of seats reserved. N is what? The number of seats reserved, okay. So we are transferring from one flight to another flight, right? So here it is deducting, okay, here it is deducting the value or the number of seats, and then here it is depositing the number of seats that is stored in the value called that is stored in the variable called n. Okay, so here I am updating the value x equal to x minus n, okay, and then I am writing the value right item of x. So here first I have read the value of x, then I have performed the update operation, that is number of, I am transferring the number of seats that has been stored in the variable x to y. Okay, so that's why here it is deducting the value, that is number of seats x equal to x minus 1, then I am writing the value of x, then I am reading the variable called y, okay, whatever the value stored in the y that has been read, then I am adding the value, the number of seats are stored in n, so y equal to y plus n, then I am writing the value y. Okay, so this is what the transaction T1, where it reads the value x and then it updates the value of x, then it is writes the value of x, then it reads the value of y, then updates the value y, then again it writes the value y. Then in transaction T2 I am reading the value x, then again I am performing some update operation x equal to x plus m, and then I am writing the value x, that whatever it has been updated. Okay, next we have lost update problems. Okay, whenever you are performing some transactions, okay, some problems occurs, right? So here we are dealing with some problems like what is lost update problem. Okay, this problem occurs when two transactions that access the same database items have their operations interleaved in a way that makes the value of some database items incorrect. Okay, so let's discuss one example related to lost update problem. So what is lost update problem? So here you can see we have two transactions. Okay, the two transactions are executing concurrently and they are executing in an interleaved fashion, right? So here we have a transaction T1. So here it first reads the read item of x. So here it reads the value of an x. So x is assigned with 400. Okay, the 400 value. Okay, after that x equal to x minus n. So here n value is 200. So here x value is 400. 400 minus 200, right? So after that the transaction T2 executes and in that it reads read item of x. So what is the updated value of x? Updated value of x is 200. So after that x equal to x plus 1. So x value is 200, m value is assigned with 300. So 200 plus 300. Now the value of x is 500, right? After that write item of x. The transaction T1 writes, the transaction T1 executes and it writes the value of x. The x value is now 500. So x equal to write item of x equal to 500. So what problem has occurred here? So again here it is reading the item of y and transaction T2 executes and it writes the write item of x. So here write item of x is what? Write item of x is 500. Okay, so here item x has an incorrect value because it is updated by T1 is lost or overwritten. So here what the transaction T1 has executed and it has updated the value, and whenever it has updated the value it was 200. Okay, but when the transaction T2 has executed and finally it is writing 500 value. Okay, so this is nothing but we call it as a lost update problem. So whatever the transaction T1 has written it is lost and or it is overwritten. Okay, you can see here initially it has read the value 400, then it has updated the x value and 400 minus 200, now the x value is 200. After that transaction T2 is executed and it has read the value 200. After that it has performed the x update operation, that is 200 plus 300, that is 500. After that T1 is executed and it has read the value x value, that is 500. Now again T2 is executed and it has written the value of x, that is 500. But what is the problem? Whatever the T1 has updated the values, okay, that is 200 and it has been read by T2, but finally it is writing what? 500. Okay, so that is what we call it as a lost update problem, where item x has an incorrect value because whatever it has been updated by T1 is lost or overwritten. So here the value should be written by T2 is 200, but now it is writing finally is 500. So this is called as a lost update problem. I hope this lost update problem is clear, right? Okay, whatever the transaction T1 has updated the value, so finally that is not been written by transaction T2. Okay, it is writing 500. Okay, so this is called as that's why the item x has an incorrect value, because whatever the value that has been updated by T1 is lost or it has been overwritten. Next we have temporary update or dirty read problem. Okay, this problem occurs when one transaction updates a database item and then transaction fails for some reason. The updated item is accessed by another transaction before it is changed back to its original value. So what is temporary update or dirty read problem? So this kind of problem occurs when transaction T1 is executing, okay, and the transaction T1 is executed and it has not committed its transaction, okay, and the transaction T2 has executed and it has read the value, the transaction T2 has read the value of transaction T1 and it has committed its transaction. Okay, so after that, when the transaction T1 is executing and there are some failure, failure has occurred, okay, or the transaction T1 when it is executing, the transaction has failed, okay, and it has not yet committed, right? So again it is rolling back to its original value, okay. So when it has rolled back to its original value, but transaction T2 has already read the value from transaction T1, which is no more exist. So in that case what happens? So this kind of problem is called as a temporary update or dirty read problem. Okay, let's discuss one example of dirty read problem or temporary update problem. So here we have two transactions T1 and T2. So first I am reading the value of an x. Okay, initially it has been assigned to 400. After that I am updating the x value x minus n, that is 400 minus 200. Now we have x value 200 and I have written that value 200. Okay, after that transaction T2 is executing and it is reading the value of x. Okay, what is the x value? 200. After that I am updating the x value, x equal to x plus m. So 200 plus 300, I have now 500 value. Okay, then I am writing the value 500 and then I have committed the transaction. Okay, now x value is 500 and transaction T2 has committed. Okay, next when transaction T1 is executing, the failure has occurred. Okay, maybe because of some router problem or switch problem or because of some wire connection. Okay, maybe because of some reasons the transaction T1 has failed. Okay, so once it has failed, okay, it is rolling back to its original value. Okay, so whenever it has, you can see transaction T1 fails and must change the value of x back to its old value. Meanwhile, T2 has read the temporary incorrect value of x. The value of item x that is read by T2 is called dirty data because it has been created by a transaction that has not completed and committed yet. Hence, this problem is also known as dirty read problem. Okay, so whatever the transaction T2 has read the value of transaction T1, okay, that whatever the transaction it has not yet completed and it is not committed, but transaction T2 has read the transaction T1 value. So such kind of problem is known as dirty read problem or temporary update problem. You can see here it has read the 200 value. After that it has updated the value 500. then here the failure has occurred. Now it is rolling back to its original value. Okay, rolling back to its original value. What is the original value of X? 400. Okay, now the transaction T2 has read value 200. Okay, so whatever the value that has been read by transaction T2, it is no more exists, right? So this kind of problem is known as dirty read problem. Okay, so this kind of problem occurs whenever the transaction is executing and whenever the failure has occurred because of some reasons. So in that case, we come across some such kind of problem. So next we have incorrect summary problem. So what is incorrect summary problem? If one transaction is calculating an aggregate summary function on number of records, while other transactions are updating some of these records, the aggregate function may calculate some values before they are updated and some values after they are updated. So what happens? We'll directly discuss one example related to incorrect summary problem. So here we have two transactions T1 and T2. Okay, so we have two processes A and B. Okay, or we can consider A is one account and B is one more account. So we have A account and B account. A has 100 rupees and B has 200 rupees. The summation of both the account, it should give us 300 rupees value, right? So here when we are executing two transactions, first T2 transaction is executing, we have sum equal to 0, then read of A. Okay, it is reading the value of A, that is A account value, that is 100. Okay, after that sum equal to sum plus A. So sum equal to sum plus A. So what is sum value? 0. And what is A value? A value is 100. So here there is no change. Okay, so whatever the value that has been assigned to A, so that is retained. So here A value is what? 100. Okay, but when the transaction T1 is executing, okay, so it is reading the value of B. So what is the value of B? Value of B is, account B is 200 rupees. So it has read the 200 rupees and then B equal to B plus 100. So here we are updating the value of account B, that is B plus 100. So B plus 100, that is B is 200 plus 100. Okay, so that is nothing but 300. So B equal to 300. So now the B value is what? 300. But initially the value was 200, right? So here now after that I am writing the value of B. So what is the value of B now? 300. Okay. So after that in transaction T2 I am reading the value of B. So what is the value of B? 300. 300. Next I am performing one operation, sum equal to sum plus B. So sum value is what? Sum value is same. Sum value is 100. But B value is what? B value is changed, right? We have updated the, in transaction T1 it has updated the B value. So now it is 300. So 300 plus 100 is what? Sum value is now 100 and B value is 300. So now it is, now the value is 400. Now the value is what? 400. Sum value is 400. So this is called incorrect summary problem. Okay. The summation should be 300, but we are getting here 400. That is nothing but 100 plus 300 equal to 400. This is incorrect summary problem. Okay. The result should be what? 300, but here we are getting 400 value. Why? Because here in transaction T1 it has updated the account B value. Okay. So that's why we are getting incorrect summary problem or incorrect value. Okay, here transaction T2 has maintained the same value. So account A in sum equal to sum plus A, account A is what? 100 and it has maintained the same value. So account A has 100 value, so sum is 0, so sum is stored with 100 value. So account A is same, so it has 100 rupees. That's it. But in transaction T1 we are updating the account B value. Okay, so here it is reading the B value, that is 200, then B plus 100, 200 plus 100, so it is writing 300 value. In transaction T2 I am reading 300, then sum equal to sum plus B. Sum is 100, then B value is 300. So here I am getting 400. So this is incorrect problem, incorrect summary problem, because I have to get 300 as summation, but here I am getting 400 value. So this kind of problem is called incorrect summary problem. Okay, this is occurred. This error is occurred because here we have updated the account B value. Yes, I hope all three kinds of problems are clear, right? So what, first we discussed about lost update problem. In lost update problem, what happens? That the transaction T1, whatever it has updated the value, and finally when the transaction T2 is getting the different value, okay, whatever the transaction T1 has written the value, that is lost or overwritten, okay, because here whatever I have read the value, the transaction T2 has read the value, that is 200, and it is updated, okay, that value has been updated and it is writing here again transaction T2, finally it is writing the 500 value, whatever the value that has been read by T1 is lost or overwritten. So such kind of problem is called as lost update problem. Next we discussed about dirty read problem or temporary update problem. In temporary update or dirty read problem, what happens? Whatever the transaction T1 has updated the value, okay, maybe it has read the 400 value, after that it has updated and now the X value is 200, and T2 has read that 200 value, again it has updated the X value and now the X value is 500, okay, and it has written that X value 500, okay, and it has committed, okay, it has read the value 200 and then next it has updated, now it is 500 and it has committed, okay. Next in the transaction T1 the failure has occurred, okay, once the failure has occurred and this transaction is not completed yet and it is not committed yet, so it is rolling back to its original value. What its original value is? What is the original value? 400, but it has read 200 value, okay, whatever it has read the value 200, it is no more exist, okay. So whatever the value that has the transaction T2 has read that has been read by T1, that is no more exist, and such kind of problem is called dirty read problem. So whatever the value that has been read by T1 is dirty read, okay. So this kind of problem is called as a dirty read problem. And incorrect summary problem, so whatever the value that has been assigned A and B, okay, 100 plus 200, and we should get the value, the summation value as 300, but we have read the value and in the transaction T1 it has updated the value, so that's why in the transaction T1 we are getting some incorrect value, okay, because the transaction T1 has updated the account B value, that's why we are getting 100 plus 300, 400 value. This is incorrect summary problem, but we have to get which result value 300, but here we are getting 400 value. So this is called as an incorrect summary problem. Then next we have why recovery is needed. Whenever a transaction is submitted to a DBMS for execution, the system is responsible for making sure that either all the operations in the transaction are completed successfully and their effect is recorded permanently in the database, or the DBMS must not permit some operations of a transaction T to be applied to the database while other operations of T are not. Okay, so here whenever the transaction is submitted to a DBMS, it is responsible to make that whatever the operations we have performed, read or write, or maybe I have deposited some money into the account, or I have performed some update operation. So in that case, all the transactions should be completed successfully and their effects must be recorded into the database, or it should be permanently saved into the database, whatever the operation I have performed on the transaction, right? So here, whenever you are performing a transaction, okay, and you come across number of failures, okay, so whenever the failure occurs and the transaction fails, okay, so there are different types of failures, right? So first we have a computer failure or system crash. A computer failure occurs maybe because of hardware, software or network error occurs in the computer system during transaction executing. During transaction execution, hardware crashes are usually media failures, for example main memory failure, okay. So here computer failure occurs because of your hardware failure or maybe your software failure or because of network error. So such kind of errors when it occurs and we are executing some transaction, okay, in the middle of your transaction execution, and such kind of error occurs and your transaction fails because of computer failure, because of software failure or hardware failure or because of some network issues. Next we have transaction or system error. This kind of failure occurs when a transaction failure may occur because of erroneous parameter values or because of logical programming error, or user may interrupt the transaction during its execution. Okay, whenever you are supplying some incorrect parameter values, or whenever there is an logical errors in the program, or as a user you are interrupting or you are cancelling the transaction, or user may interrupt the transaction during its execution. User only is cancelling the transaction, or whenever you are performing such operation called integer overflow, or when you are performing division by 0, whenever you are performing such kind of operation, so in that case a transaction or system error occurs. Okay, so these are some parameters when you are performing such kind of operations, a transaction or system error occurs. The next we have local error or exception conditions detected by the transaction. During transaction execution, certain condition may occur that necessitate cancellation of the transaction. For example, data for the transaction may not be found. That an exception condition such as insufficient account balance in the banking database may cause a transaction such as fund withdrawal to be cancelled. Okay, so this is nothing but a local error when you want to transfer some amount from one account to another account. Okay, and maybe you are trying to withdraw 10,000 rupees, but you are in your account you have only 5,000 rupees, and you are trying to access the amount, or you are trying to withdraw the amount 10,000 rupees, or you are trying to you are making a transaction where you are transferring 10,000 rupees from your account to another account. So in such condition, local errors may occur. Okay, so that is what, in that case it will throw an error saying that insufficient amount to transfer the amount from your account to another account. Okay, next we have the next kind of failure is concurrency control enforcement. The concurrency control method may decide to abort the transaction to be restarted later because of several transactions are in a state of deadlock. Okay, so whenever the number of transactions are executing, okay, and they are in queue, there are many number of transactions are in queue and they are in deadlock. Okay, and they are in a position of deadlock state, or they are in state of deadlock. So in that case, what happens? The concurrency control method may decide to abort the transaction. Okay, so you want to so maybe you are performing a bus reservation. Okay, you want to book a seat. Okay, or you are going for the airline reservation, and there are many number of users are in a queue. Okay, so what happens in that case? All the processes or all the users are in deadlock state. So in that case, what we do, we abort the transactions because several transactions are in a state of deadlock. Okay, so in such cases, we may abort the transaction. Next, we have disk failure. Some disk block may lose their data because of disk read or write head crash. This may happen during a read or write operation of the transaction. Okay, so even we are performing some transaction, in that case the disk failure occurs because of disk read write head crash. Okay, so this is one kind of error occurs and the transaction has been failed. The next we have physical problems. This refers to an endless list of problems that includes power or air conditioning failure or fire, overwriting disk or tapes by mistake, and mounting of a wrong tape by the operator. So these are the number of reasons, maybe your power failure or air conditioning failure, or you are overwriting the disk or tape by mistake, or your mounting of a wrong tape by the operator. So these are all such kind of problem occurs and your transaction is failing. So this comes under physical problem. So these are the number of failures occurs when you are executing a transaction. You are performing some transaction and this kind of failure can occur. Maybe it is computer failure or transaction error or local error or concurrency control enforcement or disk failure or physical problem. So these are the different types of failure can occur when you are performing a transaction. Next we have transaction and system concept. So transaction is an atomic unit of work that is either completed in its entirely or not done at all. Okay, so here for recovery purpose, the system needs to keep track of when the transaction starts, terminates and commits or aborts. Okay, so for recovery purpose, we need to keep track of like the system needs to keep track of what the transaction, where the transaction is starting and where the transaction is terminating, where it has committed and where it has aborted. So all this we need to keep track of the transaction. We have the transaction operation called, we have begin transaction. This marks the beginning of transaction execution. Next we have read write. So it specifies the read write operation on the database items. End transaction, this specifies the read and write of transaction operation have ended and marks the end of transaction execution. So begin for you are starting the transaction, okay, marking the beginning of transaction execution. Here we are performing read write operations onto the database, and end transaction is you are perform the read write operation and you are ending your transaction. Commit is nothing but whatever the transaction you have performed, you are saving that whatever the transaction you have performed and you are saving that transaction successfully onto the database. For that you are performing commit transaction. That is nothing but whatever changes you have made, okay, that can be safely committed to the database and will not be changed in the future. Okay, so whatever the transaction you have performed and you have updated permanently to the database and it can't be undone. Next is rollback is what? This signifies or this signals that transaction has ended unsuccessfully, so that any changes or effects, changes or effects that the transaction may have applied to the database must be undone. Okay, so what happens? Sometimes failure occurs, and in that case we can roll back to its original value. So whenever you are performing an rollback operation, you can change the value. Okay, these are nothing but transaction states. Okay, so whenever you are executing a transaction, okay, initially it is in passive mode. Okay, so initially we start with begin transaction, and initially the transaction is in passive mode. Then whenever suppose you have written a program, okay, and once you click on execute, it comes from passive mode to active mode. Similarly, when you are executing a transaction, it comes from passive mode to active mode. So once the transaction is executing or once it comes to active mode, we are performing read write operation. Okay, this is nothing but you are reading the data from the disk or you are writing the data onto the database. Once you perform operation and writing the data onto the database. Then next we have partially committed. Next state is what? Partially committed. That whatever changes you have made, it is stored in the RAM. Okay, whatever the operation you have done, maybe you have deposited some more amount into your account, and that is the like now you have the final amount is 12,000. Okay, so whatever the changes you have done, whatever the changes that are done, it is stored in the RAM. Okay, that is, this state is called as an partially committed. It is not fully committed or it is not reflected permanently into the database. So it is partially committed. Whatever the changes has been done, it is partially committed. The next we have commit. Okay, in commit what it does? So commit is nothing but once you have performed the transaction, and commit is you are saving the successful transaction. The successful transaction is nothing but you have deposited the amount, and commit is successfully you are reflecting the data onto the database. Okay, so it can't be undone. After that we have abort. So what is abort? So abort is next we have once we have committed and you have stored the data onto the database. Next we have next state is terminated. Terminated state is deallocating the resources like RAM, CPU and register. So when you are performing an changes or when you are performing a transaction, okay, you are using some resources like RAM, CPU and register. Okay, once you have completed the transaction and you have committed the transaction, next is terminating. Okay, terminating is nothing but you are deallocating all the resources what you have used. Okay, next state is failed. Okay, failed state is what? The failed state occurs when there is a power failure or router problem or switch problem or there is a wire connection problem. Okay, it occurs suddenly in an active state. Okay, whenever you are, we can take one example. Okay, in an example of an Indian Railways active state to fail. Okay, only when you have entered to place and from place data. Only you have just entered your to place value and from place value, and the transaction has failed.